Good morning. So I'd like to invite you to drop into 30 seconds of silence upon this wave of love that continues to grow in this container of love. So let's begin. In this very room, there's quite enough love for all the world. And in this very room, there's quite enough joy for all the world. And there's quite enough love and quite enough power to walk through our every fear. For Spirit, one Spirit, is in this very room, in this very room, in this very room. And so I invite you to join me in the energetic, the practice of affirmative prayer. And I speak these words in the first person because the truth of it is there's only one of us here. The divine source, spirit, God, goddess, love, beauty, creativity, infinite possibility, it is all part of that quantum field that lives within us, around us. We are immersed in it, and it is immersed in us. And so I know that we come together today, and I come here in service to that, in service to the guidance, the awareness, to the legacy of ancient wisdom traditions that we celebrate and do our best day by day to live more and more from the truth of our being, to awaken and to wake up over and over again. This is my opportunity, and this is my welcome to myself each and every day. So I give thanks. I give thanks for the beautiful wisdom and clarity of Dr. Ernest Holmes. I give thanks for beautiful music that lifts my heart and inspires me like no other thing can, for the brilliance and the genius and the compassion and the inclusion of an artist like Martin Kerr, who has blessed and continues to bless so many lives. That is a powerful soundtrack in my life. I give thanks for the people throughout the time and ages of my incarnation here that have loved me and modeled love, have modeled wisdom, have encouraged me to step up to the next rung of the ladder. I'm so grateful for their example, for their love, for their wisdom. I'm grateful to know that I am never stuck, that infinite possibility awaits my welcome and revelation. I give thanks and gratitude for all the service that has come together so that we may spend this purposeful, meaningful, and transformative time together. I release these words and invite you to say with me, and so it is. All righty, well, here we are. So Martin and I have the same color scheme on today. I don't want to tell you how that happened, because we didn't plan it. But I got up and I grabbed a shirt out of the closet, and I put it on, and then I turned the lights on to see what shirt I had on, and then I dressed accordingly. And so I'm just grateful for divine guidance, and also that Martin got the same call, because we're samesies today. So just wanted to throw that in there. I was like, wow, look at you, same color. So I want to share with you today, and so there is an annual theme going on in our movement in the Centers for Spiritual Living, and so we share these themes monthly, and I've been doing my best to track with that. And so this month's theme is integrity. And so there's a picture of Dr. Ernest Holmes, our founder, who wrote the Science of Mind textbook in 1926. It was rewritten in 1933, and he was a prolific writer and student and philosopher and and mystic. And so we are part of his legacy, and I'm going to share what his legacy was as well today. So this idea of spiritual integrity. So integrity, if you look at the definition in the Science of Mind textbook, and if you look at the definition in the dictionary, they are identical. Integrity is the state of being whole and undivided. Whole and undivided. So have you ever felt like you're at enemy with yourself? As Martin called me last week, said, what are you talking about? I said, I'm talking about forgiveness, basically. And he said, oh, I got a song for that. But it's having the capacity and the practices and realizing it's possible to be at peace with ourselves. It's possible for us to be at peace with ourselves, despite what's going on in the world. It's possible for us to be at peace right now. It is. Anybody agree with that, or is it just me?
Yes.
Oh, beautiful. But it's possible, despite what's going on in the world, because to live from the inside out means that we can choose in any moment our state of being. Sometimes it's hard because we get stuck in certain ways of being, and life shows up in certain ways that challenge us. And so what the wisdom teachings tell us is how can we have the capacity, the spiritual bandwidth to stand in those times of uncertainty when it feels like we have an enemy, because the meaning making we're giving to our lives creates that experience. And how do we endure that? How do we lean into the discomfort? We did my beautiful partner Laura and I did a Q process yesterday, and Karen Quigley was not able to facilitate, so we got the opportunity and we did it together, and it was really wonderful. But I was reminded of the power of that in the information. We had a really great group of 10 people, and every time we dive into it, it's a gift to us. So I want to thank Karen. I know that it was not your intention to gift us with that, but thank you so much. But it's a powerful, powerful practice. It's transformative. But what it requires is what it's asking us to do is to live in a state of wholeness and being undivided. That there's only one life, that life is God, that life is perfect, that life is my life right now. And so Dr. Holmes wrote this about integrity. Since God is equally present in and as all of creation, each individual is an expression of integrity that is demonstrated through practices such as, now this reads like a cue card, such as practices as honesty, compassion, forthrightness, generosity, and strength of character. And those are beautiful, beautiful qualities to live from. We are imbued, he continues, I don't have it on the screen, but he continues with, we also understand that we are imbued with volition, the power of choice. We can choose in this moment. We could have a transformational moment right here and right now to choose a new idea, to choose a new way of being. Twinkling of an eye, as it says in Scripture. But he says, unfortunately, which unfortunately be used to opt out of integrity and make choices that do not serve our own best interest or that of others touched by us. So we are always a choice. We can either live from our integrity and our wholeness, or we cannot. We understand it, and that's part of the human condition. And no one's going to say, you can't, well, there's no one judging us. The infinite doesn't judge. The infinite always says, I love you. And it says, yes. So if we decide to be our worst self, the infinite just says, hey, I got you. You'll be our worst self. So support you in lying, support you in cheating, support you in scheming, whatever it may be, for one's own self-gain or whatever it may be. The infinite will support that. So we wonder why, how this works, but this beautiful quantum field just can simply say yes. The problem with that is there's a law of cause and effect that Holmes talked about. That we live in a universe of balance. And so when we go way far out on one end, the universe will find a way to bring us back, to find balance in it. So we may think we're getting away with something. We may think we're going to gain something by a certain behavior that is not in integrity, but in fact, it will come back to our, the balance is demanded. It's the way the universe works. And I have read story after story, I have no doubt. Now, there are practices on the planet, and even Dr. Holmes talks about this, where you can break the chain of karma. The Kriya Yoga tradition says 3 years of Kriya Yoga, you will break all your karmic connections. I think, wow, what a lovely idea. So you don't carry your past with you. So it's alive. There's traditions. But for most people, in most places, we're not going to get away with anything. The old heavyweight champion Joe Louis used to say, they can run, but they can't hide. And that's pretty true for all of us. We can run, but we can't hide. And it's good to know that. It's not a threat. It's just the way life works. So I want to share with you one of the great stories. So Dr. Holmes has this beautiful book called, he used to say when people would ask him, are you guys Christians or what are you? A bunch of lunatics just doing these prayers and manifesting things and you think you're God. What's wrong with you? All that stuff. But Dr. Holmes read the Christian Bible every day, and he wrote a book called Words That Heal Today, which is one of my favorites. And I pulled one of the parables out because he looks at a lot of the teachings of Jesus in this. He loved the Christian Bible, and he thought that the birth of Jesus was the most amazing thing that ever happened. He just didn't simply agree that we had to go through Jesus to be saved. He felt like we had to awaken the Christ nature within us. And then heaven is a current, present moment experience. It's not something that we earn. We're not here to suffer. As he said, we're not punished for our sins. We're punished by our sins. And sins, as he interpreted it, were errors. And so he knew that if we're not utilizing the law of infinite possibility in the healthiest way, it would visit us once again. That we would go so far in the direction because everything doesn't go. That's one of the mistakes that people make with our tradition. So anyway, I want to share this with you. So Peter goes to Jesus and he says, Lord, how many times shall my brother sin against me and I forgive him? Till 7 times? And Jesus says, no, I say unto thee, not 7 times, it is 70 times 7. And then Jesus told them a parable explaining the meaning of forgiveness. He likened the kingdom of God unto a king who, in looking over his accounts, discovered that one of his servants owed him a large sum of money. And so the king was about to foreclose on this obligation and sell the man and his wife and family into slavery for payment of the debt. You know, slavery's been around a long time, isn't it? If Jesus is telling this story, I thought about that when I was reading it. I was like, man, what is it with us that we own people? We think we can own people. I won't go there. That's another talk. But I just thought, wow, even alive in Jesus' time was this idea of slavery. And then he said, I'm going to throw them all in jail. So the servant went to the king and said, please, sir, don't do this. I'm so sorry. I've had a really rough year. You know, I was working up in Fort McMurray and things shut down. There was a fire. There was a flood in my basement. It's been tough. And so the king's heart just cracked open and said, you know what? I'm going to forgive all your debt. And the servant was like, wow, this is awesome. Woohoo, as Barbie Lee would say. Yeah, there we go. If you need a woohoo, she's right there. So what happened then is the servant's leaving the king's palace and he's running down the street and he runs into a guy that he knows that owes him money. Yeah. And he says, hey, you know what? When he runs into his friend and owes him the money, he says, hey, you need to pay me. And his friend says, I've had a rough year. Remember, you and I were working up at Fort McMurray, and then we had the fire and then the flood in my basement, and I was there helping you. And he says, I don't care. You're going to pay me, or I'm going to throw you in jail till the debt's paid. And so he has the guy thrown in jail. He's just been forgiven, and he takes his buddy and throws him in jail. So the one who had been forgiven would not forgive. Very interesting, isn't it? Dr. Holmes says this about forgiveness. Forgiveness, there must be a continual state of forgiveness, else there will be a continual state of unforgiveness. Isn't that interesting? The forgiveness it's not just walking the column tipping forgiveness circle. It's a practice. It's a way of being. It's a way of life. So Dr. Holmes writes about this. He writes about Jesus. He says, Jesus was the wisest man who ever lived. He was the most loving, the kindest, and most compassionate. He was at the same time the most just. The story was an object lesson to teach that it is impossible to be forgiven unless we forgive. We cannot receive what we refuse to give. It's one of the laws that we live in. to possess without sharing. This we can never do. It is only as we share the treasures of the kingdom that we really possess them. Jesus, the mastermind, had likened the law of cause and effect to the anger of a king who has the power to execute his will. He was not referring to an angry God. But isn't it interesting that here's Jesus coming along and he's talking about, he was modeling justice. He was modeling this universal justice. So we can't, if we're not willing to forgive others, we can't be forgiven. And we can't have what we long to have in our experience unless we're willing to offer that. It's counterintuitive, isn't it? But that's just the way this is the way the energetic field works. This is why Dr. Holmes wrote about this parable the way he did. So we can't hoard our good and expect it, because what we do is we block the flow of life. There's a flow of life that supports all of us. I was driving up here this morning, and I'm thinking about putting things together, and I want to be in service well. I want to be clear in my articulation. I want to bring the best of ideas that I can have. And I have a practice that I'll share with you that I've been using quite a bit. The Bible has a lot of promises in it. And it's sacred text. I know it's many things, but there's a consciousness there. And in one of the scriptures it says, if you ask in my name, it will be answered, or it will be given, depending on the version you read. And I have been doing this practice when I go to bed at night, when I get up in the morning. And I ask in the Christ consciousness, because that's the consciousness I want to live in. I want to live in the peace that passeth all understanding. That to me has great appeal. And I want that to be a permanent experience. And so I started using this practice, and as I was driving up here today, someone or something, that prayer was answered. Because something landed in my heart and part of my meditation this morning too, was that I want to be surprised by the infinite today. I make the request because we have to ask. You see, if we don't ask, it doesn't interact with us. That's the beauty of an affirmative prayer. When you partner with a practitioner, or you have your own practice of affirmative prayer, you become a prayer and you ask. The totality of your being, the totality of the practitioner in the ideal situation is asking from the bottom of their depth. And it's a surrender. And so something landed in my heart this morning, and my energetic field was just shifted immediately. And I just thought, oh my God, thank you. Wherever this has come from, thank you. But it's part of the practice, because I was getting a little frustrated with God because God didn't seem to be showing up every time I said I'd ask in your name. Because then I was standing there saying, I asked in your name, and then I'm standing there like this, tapping my foot, waiting for the answer. And so I had to reach a point of openness and willingness. Sometimes our prayers don't show up until we're exhausted from saying our prayers, because there's a step in prayer treatment called release. And as much as I'd love to tell you that we all release our prayers, it takes practice. That's all I'm going to say. It takes forgetting that we've made the prayer. It takes forgetting that we've made the request, because we've practiced it so much, it's part of who we are, and all of a sudden realize something opens that hadn't opened before. It's like, oh, wow, so cool. Thank you so much. I'm so grateful. So we can't have what we won't give. Isn't that frustrating? Mine. So the next piece that I want to share with you, I mentioned last week, but I didn't have time, is spiritual and integral spirituality. In the spiral dynamics worldview, and I've ridden this horse a bit, but I want to just touch on it today, because in my contemplation and meditation around this about what's coming, and if you haven't seen it before, I'm going to do a real quick overview and show you the basic. These are worldviews that go back 250,000 years ago. So 250,000 years ago, we had beige that showed up, and that was survival. And the thing that dropped in for me in my meditation this morning I thought was so cool is, if you're familiar with the Fertile Crescent. So the Fertile Crescent is a place upon our planet where life really started to flourish. It was near the Mediterranean, where Israel and all of Syria and all of those countries lined up. And it had the environment where grains could grow more prolifically, where animals could flourish. And so when you had more food, the population could grow. And so that is sort of the seat of humanity around the Mediterranean. And so then it was finding the right foods we could eat that won't kill us. finding, raising the right animals that could sustain us and all these things. So probably thousands of years of experimenting. But here we are, 250,000 years ago, and now what our opportunity is not about physical sustenance. For us, the opportunity is to figure out what sustains us spiritually and energetically. What can we feed ourselves that is not filled with poison or it becomes a distraction? And I thought, oh my gosh, it's no different. 250,000 years ago, now we've evolved to a state where, for us that live in this environment and these conditions, we're not quite so worried about the next meal. Some are, of course. But it's not about figuring out what to consume. But for us spiritually, it's to figure out what we entertain. Because that which we dwell upon, we become. And I just think that's so brilliant. It's so beautiful. It's not my idea, but it landed, and I thought, oh my gosh, it's the same thing. So then we went to purple, and purple's, we got away from being all on our own to moving into tribes. And part of purple is magical thinking. It was superstition. It was, the black magic. It was, spells and incantations. It was throwing maidens into the volcano to appease this wrathful god. And so, but the other part of it is it's a sacredness. There's a ritual and a sacredness in it that can be quite beautiful. And then we move to this red, and red is warrior. It moves back into this warrior and so that's where the period of time where the Israelites and the Philistines were at battle, and the New Testament is full of these battles. But it represents that warrior mentality. Then there's blue, which is the order of law, having certain things in place. And that can become obsessive too, then, because when we become so entrenched in blue, we don't want to move forward because we got to make sure everybody's got to be in our team and in our political camp. They've got to be in our church. They've got to pray the same way we pray, all that stuff. That's the extreme of it. And then we have orange, and orange is about commerce. It's about having, and the Industrial Revolution and how we manufacture product. Growth for the sake of growth is where it gets out of bounds. And then we have green, which is love. So what I want to say about these is that the spiritual, integral spirituality it's taking the best of all of these to give birth to what is emerging right now, which is turquoise, which is yellow, and turquoise is above it. About 30 years ago, yellow showed up. But it's how do we on-ramp that? Is to take the best of all of it. So there's a beautiful integral scholar by the name of Steve McIntosh. He says this. These paradigms are just ideas. They are the worldview that I just expressed to you. He said, new paradigms are a dime a dozen these days. However, the worldview of integral consciousness is not so much a new paradigm, but it is an integration and harmonization of all the previous existing worldviews with a new and inclusive light. So it's realizing that our capacity to find the right nourishment and survival is important. And to feed ourselves well and bring that forward so that we can be more effective in purple. And to realize the sacredness and the beauty of life. And to have rituals and practices in our lives that bring us alive. That moves us to blue, where we can have order in our lives. Where we can sit and we have a place where we meditate and where we journal and where we read and where we improve ourselves. We need all that. We need to have a sense of order here. If all these chairs were facing different directions, it would be distracting, to say the least. And then we have to have the capacity to live in the orange and to work well with what we have. The only reason to have financial well-being in our lives is so we can continue to do this work well, to pursue the things that we want to learn, to travel to places that we'd like to travel because we feel called to it. So it's working with it, using the good that we have to bless all of us. And to in line with what we're welcoming. Because this is about us welcoming this new paradigm and understanding it and seeing the value of all these to be included. It's not throwing them away and saying, oh, we don't need survival anymore because now I'm yellow all the time, which is a perfect indication that you are not. Because yellow includes all of them. And then, of course, the green. The green is the love at all cost. So how can we bring our love to all those memes, those worldviews behind us? And also welcome the yellow. So we're all going on this trip together because we're all one. That's what spiritual integration is, to live in that. Martin's beautiful song. You're not my enemy. Sometimes the enemy lives right in here because we don't have the capacity to forgive ourselves. And it's okay if that's where you are. That's just the current conditions. So, as Steve McIntosh said, it's including them all. It's existing worldviews into a new and inclusive light. So that's what we're welcoming. So how do we welcome that? Well, we find out where we're not living in our wholeness. When we do the Q process, when we do our own Q sheets, when we look at our own, and if you've got another practice of shadow integration, good for you. We have practices that help us wake up. So clean up, wake up, meditation, prayer, reading, understanding, feeding yourself this rich food, getting Words That Heal Today and reading about Dr. Ernest Holmes, reading his biography. I'm watching this beautiful, one of the people we're celebrating this month in our tradition is Howard Thurman. Beautiful man. And I got his book, and I'm going to bring some Howard Thurman stuff with me next week. A beautiful, beautiful man. And a mystic. He's from our tribe. And his life story is amazing. He was one of the great influences for Dr. Martin Luther King. He taught at Morehouse College. Brilliant, brilliant scholar. Came from nothing. I'll tell you some of his stories next week. So we're on this road together of integration. You know, we're not here. As it said yesterday, we were going over the Q stuff again. And, you know, as children, you know, I have a 3-year-old granddaughter. I have a 1.5-year-old granddaughter. She took the 1.5 years, our preemie, we call her our miracle. She took her first steps yesterday. So we're like, woo, yeah, you go, baby. But they don't get up. Like Audrey, she speaks very well now. She doesn't say, you know, I've come here to be miserable. Audrey, what are you going to be when you grow up? Dysfunctional. I'm going to be blaming and angry. Kids don't do that. We convince them out of that. We talk them into some of the unhealed crap we got because we don't even talk them into it. We just model it for them. And they feel it. They feel it. We feel this. You know, our words are one thing. Ralph Waldo Emerson said, who you are speaks so loudly I can't hear a word you're saying. Isn't that true? So what are you saying right now? Because it's so important for us to live in the wholeness and to have the capacity and the wisdom and the guidance and the clarity and the people around us that can encourage us to keep on going. Man, oh man, I mean, if we all had to shut it all down because we made a mistake, there wouldn't be any of us left. That's how we learn. That's how we grow. That's how, as the Q says, then you can lean into the discomfort. Then you realize, so when someone is accusing you of something, if something is upset about a condition and it involves you, it speaks more about that individual than it does about you. That's what's so confusing at times. Especially when you're raised by people that if anything goes wrong, it's your fault. You know, I had a dad that would slap me around on a frequent basis. And then the dysfunction of that was, it was my responsibility to apologize to him because he got upset. So you take on this, well, geez, he got mad because obviously there's something inherently wrong with me. Otherwise, he wouldn't have done that. Well, maybe not. Maybe he was out of control. And maybe he never got the parenting he needed. So he was a perfect parent for me. And I love him dearly because he was scared. He lived a life of fear. He lived a life, I'm not enough. So he got to pass on to me because I was his son. I'm not enough. And so it's not that I'm better than him. I just want to break the pattern. I don't want to live his legacy out. And it's uncomfortable at times. So I'm just saying, I'm sharing a little bit of my story because so when people are pointing fingers and are upset and they're accusing you of things, it says volumes about them. That's their meaning making. And it's not trying to, and it's having, then you can have compassion for them. As Dr. Gary says, well, tell me more. Tell me what's triggered in you. What is this energy? What is it you have to, what is going on? Otherwise, we get enabled and meshed, and we take it on for ourselves, and then we're right there with them. And then I get to pass that energy on to somebody else. Oh, I gotta go find somebody else that's the matter with me. That's what we do, or not. So just saying. So in the last slide I want to share with you today, and it comes from the Q process, is snap. So if you go like that, that's a snap, right? Let's all snap together. 1, 2, 3. Let's do it one more time. 1, 2, 3. Boy, boy, crazy boy, be cool. Oh, wait, sorry. I was in West Side Story when I was in high school. I just clicked back in. When you're a jet all the way. Oh, my gosh. I could always sing. That got me through school, because those nuns would have killed me if I couldn't carry a tune. Yeah, they'd put me in the back and make me shut up, but as soon as they needed somebody that could carry a tune, I went right up front. Yep. Sister Marion saved my life. She said, I think you should be Tony in West Side Story. I said, okay, whatever that is. And I said, well, who's Tony in West Side Story? Really? I went to school the next day. I didn't even know I'd been cast. And people go, congratulations. For what? You're Tony in West Side Story. Anyway, so snap. Settle your body. Name the feeling. Appreciate. Name the feeling and the trigger. So I'm angry because so-and-so triggered my I'm not good enough. That's powerful spiritual practice, because when we can identify it, we're no longer it. It's not who I am. To create that gap. Appreciate the trigger. Wow, this is a gift to be transformed so I can move forward more effectively. I can lean into the discomfort and realize this isn't me, this is the experience I'm having. And then it's practice being the change. Wait a minute, I've come here, so we have a cue sheet. I've come here to be resilient, to be brilliant, to be loving, to be kind, to be joyful. It's hard for us to maintain joy. We revisited that yesterday. Joy is a very hard thing to maintain. Because we get into the joy, and then all of a sudden somebody comes along and reminds us of a story or a situation that we shouldn't be joyful about. And it's like that. Takes 2 seconds. Boom. Gone. Hard to embody joy and live from it. But that's our opportunity. So I just want to say, going down this week, if you start to go off the rails emotionally, you get triggered, feelings, go like this. In the twinkling of an eye. Let's practice our snap one more time. See, I think we should produce West Side Story here sometime. And so it is. Blessings.